Okay, so this is a little video to talk about what brushes are best for detail when you're an absolute beginner. So everybody tells you when you start you need to get the best materials, the best of everything, the best you can afford. It's not always necessarily the case. So with brushes, you are looking for decent brushes that have a natural spring. If you're using rounds, you want something with a really good point that holds plenty. So this is a synthetic blend brush. Sable are the best brushes. They always say that sable are the best. This is a sable brush. This is the only sable brush that I own. It costs an absolute fortune and it is a lovely, lovely brush. The difference between sable and synthetic is that a sable holds a lot more fluid and is not as springy, so it needs to be more fluid for you to get accuracy. So if you think about learning watercolour and a brush that is full of water and fluid and is very delicate, I mean, look at this point, this is a 14, this is 20 years old, this brush, and look at the point on it, it's amazing. So if I come into a little bit of paint and I can show you, I can get really fine detail. The hazard with a sable when you're new is that that fine detail holds a lot of fluid. I make it look easy and you're coming onto paper, you haven't got that same resistance. So if you press too hard and you're not super delicate with it, you're not going to get that fine detail. So it's putting you out of control even more. When you're starting with watercolour, you're already out of control and you need to gain some control back. So this is why I recommend a synthetic. They're hard wearing, they've got natural spring. So then when you come on to do something fine, you've got that resistance there. You can still press down and it's still relatively fine and detailed. That spring is everything that helps you when you're learning. So in my opinion, and it is my opinion, it's very subjective, everybody will have a different opinion, you're better to start with a synthetic blend and then work towards a sable if you want more fluid movements. I still use synthetic blend a hell of a lot. I very rarely, especially when I'm teaching, I very rarely touch a sable. It tends to be when I'm doing my own work and I want something really loose and fluid. So this brush as well is something that I've mentioned a few times and I've had some comments to say actually I didn't even know what one was. So this is a rigger. A rigger or a line writer. A line writer is slightly shorter and is better for beginners because it puts you again a little bit more in control. But if you think about how much brush you've got here, this is how much the paint is going to come into that brush. So if you're trying to do things like grasses or branches and you're doing it with a little detailer number 2, then what you'll find is you have to keep dipping back into the paint all of the time, or else the line becomes quite what I call scratchy. With a rigger, you've got much more flexibility and you don't have to dip as much. It does take some practice in learning how to use it, but it's great for grasses and branches. And you can see how many lines I'm able to do without having to dip back into the paint. I tend to rest on my little finger. This again is a synthetic blend brush, and this is a number 2. It's the one I use all the time. I have very few brushes really, even after 15 years, I use the same brushes. I do have other brushes in my kit, but I very rarely touch them. So I hope that helps with the brush confusion.